Jayesh Parekh, it's so wonderful to see you on camera here. You're in Singapore. Jayesh is a very old friend and an entrepreneur that I always admired, and he's a guy who combines spirituality and leadership. Um, we'll do an intro separately about you that I'm going to record. However, in summary, you've been an entrepreneur, a serial investor. You've seeded and invested and have faith in so many companies and entrepreneurs you've nurtured, and including me. Um, you've invested in one of my companies. It's delightful to have you here on our podcast.
Thank you so much to both of you, Raju and Trisha. I'm incredibly honored to be on your program today and look forward to, I hope, what is a useful chat today.
I have no doubt. And I also forgot to mention that you have also become an author of a book that you released not too long ago, which is called "What Will We Do with All This Money?" Is that correct?
What shall we do with all this money?
Ah,
Inspiring perspectives on wealth.
there you go. That will be so important to
That
talk about.
sounds so good.
Sounds very juicy. So the first question, Judge, is you've had, as I said, a pretty interesting career. You've had your ups and downs, like many of the listeners in our audience here. What does it mean when we say the word bold to you, and why is it important in your work today or anywhere in the past?
I think the most important thing about being bold is to be a risk taker. So, especially as an entrepreneur, even as a senior executive,
Mhm.
I took risks and I see people taking risks. And those who have a risk taking ability should usually venture into the entrepreneurial journey. If you're not a risk taker, it's okay. Be wherever you are, do whatever you're doing. Every millennial doesn't have to become an entrepreneur. So, bold is A, risk taking, B, it is an ambition, and an ambition which is bold to create or develop a useful product or service, a product which is useful to the masses or to a specific niche audience, but a product or service that is truly useful rather than there are a lot of exchanges, trading type of applications. In my mind, they are needed and it's fine, but I look at disruption as one measure of boldness.
Mm.
Why do you think that is even more important today than it ever was?
I think that one of the other things that is happening is that the world is just transforming. I mean, we've gone through this last couple of years, and we all recognize, right, what's going on around here. The normal is no longer normal. There's a new normal. Even the new normal doesn't seem to be sort of coming anytime soon. Everything is ups and downs, and in different parts of the world. So people who were regularly traveling are not traveling, and yet amongst all of this, I have friends who are taking risk and traveling. They are bold because they need to either deliver a product or service, uh, and therefore, either for that reason, or of course, there are folks who need to go visit their loved ones and they can't do without that. And so they take the risk. But I think it is extremely important because the world is changing out there. If you look at the food chain, for example, I'm just getting into a new venture fund, which is a good protein fund, which goes into alternative proteins. And I've been just fascinated for the last 4 or 5 months to see that when there are 10 billion people, our food system is just completely not sustainable, and so it requires a degree of boldness today. If you look at the environment, if you look at the energy system, you look at the food system, there are just so many issues in the world today that we've been ignoring, and then suddenly the last 1 year we've gotten a shock, and everybody now suddenly recognizes, and the consciousness is sort of suddenly upsurging.
Mm. That's so practically and beautifully said. So why is it that so many people who may have desired that, because the opportunity seems to abound everywhere, right? All these Whether you look at the UN manifesto and all the different opportunities that exist, and the world certainly is significantly in a disequilibrium now, exacerbated by this whole uncertainty of how to live. What do you think holds people back from looking at these as opportunities and saying, okay, how do I help, whether I'm an employee or a corporate guy, or what does it take for them to recognize these, and what should they do as a practice for them to be aware?
So two parts, right? So one are the millennials, and I'll come back to them. And then there's the rest of us. And the rest of us are already struggling with the issues that we are facing with the current pandemic. And so we're just barely able to manage our own issues, leave alone now switching gears and trying to find a new path, a new journey, a new career, a new social enterprise, etc. So I think it's fairly difficult. And then, of course, part of it is the insecurity of money. There was insecurity already in the ecosystem, but now there is a really marked degree of insecurity in the economics of the future, and therefore people want to sort of pause and saying, even people who have ideas are pausing and saying, okay, let me wait maybe another 3 months, 6 months. Is it idiotic for me to just launch into something right now, right here? However, the other folks are the younger folks, and I have huge optimism. So millennials almost on a daily, weekly basis are coming forward with mission and purpose. They all want mission and purpose. And so, there are people who are coming into the workforce who want to get into the social enterprise, either a startup or a larger organization. And there are people who are existing today working in very large MNCs or banks, or even in big social media companies who just don't agree with the philosophies. And they're willing and able, even in today's time, to plunge and go to the other side. And so, really, we have a lot to learn from them.
That's true, because hey, we're plunging in here, the two of us, and
Congratulations! Absolutely.
I was going to ask you what advice you would give people today, business owners today, whether the size of their business. What, as a leader, in simplest terms, what advice would you give leaders that have the opportunity to hire? What would be the top 3 characteristics or values do you believe leaders today should hold or uphold?
Yeah, so one is hold and uphold, right? So that's a very critical thing. First is that in these times, people just try to dodge a little bit here and there, trying to make cash flows meet, right? And so there are some businesses that are doing extremely well, but there are some businesses that are really hurting. And those businesses that are hurting are just trying to survive. And in that survival comes that pure heart, which has always been there, and now suddenly starts wavering because you really don't know whether you're going to survive and how you're going to survive, right? And so a few things, right? So one is that people who are right now hurting, forget about hiring, right? How about hanging on to people who are already working for you, who work for you for such a long, long time? And I give them, a strategic idea which says, the guys who are already at the top, take away 30, 40, 50%, of their remuneration packages, and hold the guys at the bottom of the pyramid or bottom of your pyramid of pay scales and remuneration. Maybe you take nothing, maybe you take 10% off from the bottom and 30, 40, 50% from the top. So when you average it out, because your senior guys are getting paid such a lot more money, then it all averages out. And so you'll still end up with whatever your percentage cut that you're looking for. In terms of hiring new people, without a doubt, it's a huge cross section we are at right now. So on one side, there are millennials who are looking for mission, who are looking for purpose, and their attitude is in the right place. And yet there are other millennials. If you see their resume, they've been changing jobs every year, every 2 years, right? So they're flip flopping. Gone are those days when a gentleman in here who worked for Morgan Stanley for God knows donkey's years, and those days you can't find people like that now, right? So people just flip flop around. So I think that's the other thing. I think in terms of just the value system, right? That's a toughie, right? You're looking at a resume, you're filtering people based on the resume, then you are doing a Zoom call to try and hire people, and you're trying to seek. I've met people in person, and still I've faltered. I haven't figured out exactly if the attitude is going to be right for the culture in my company, leave alone then I'm trying to hire people off Zoom. So it's extremely, extremely difficult. And so again, you do your best, and then you hope that you get the right team.
I want to go back to what you said about the pay strategy. That's certainly one way to do it. That's a how to do it that way. Why is it important to look at that in your eyes? Why and why that strategy?
Well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, there are a few very small percentage of folks who will pitch in money into their companies that are having negative cash flow. So they've made money for all their lives. They're incredibly affluent, but they hang on to their funds, accumulated funds, and they are in a certain rung and they want to be in that rung. So if it's a billionaire or 100 triple millionaire and they want to stay there, they don't want to suddenly pull out 10, 15, 20 million dollars and suddenly go to the lower rung. And so, but are there a few people who do that? Yes, in that case, there are people who have not fired anybody, have not reduced 1 cent of the paycheck. So there are some of those people. But in terms of the rest of them, cash flow is really, really important, right? That's the other thing. The last 1 year teaches us that, if you thought that, okay, let me just plan for 6 months and I'll be fine. I know so many hotels where the owners had to give the keys back, and they tried extremely hard, but they kept reducing their staff. But one day, just that day came when they just couldn't survive and they had to return the key back to the bank. Yeah.
So, everyone loves stories, Jayesh. We're going to bring it back to you a little bit as we share leadership lessons and we speak with others about what they've learned in life. I know there's probably many lessons that you and I've spoken about in the past, but can you highlight one or two that really you overcame, and there were a couple of nuggets that came out and that you still hold on to for anybody that seeks advice, or for yourself or your children? What would you say to that?
I think I'll just first go to the entrepreneurs, right? I mean, if you have entrepreneurs here who are either struggling or are thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, I think one is risk taking, but the other is resilience, right? The resilience comes in two types. So one is resilience to not give up, and you're struggling, your cash flows, you're not able to meet your payroll. You want to, expand your product line, and you're not able to, do that. And so you require a huge amount of resilience to hang in there and figure out ways to maneuver through that cash flow issues. And then the other is where you're starting to do well and you have an opportunity to grow the company 10x and 20x and 50x, but now you start getting nervous and you start wondering if can I continue to do this? And people exit out of their companies too fast, right? And so and then when they see their companies grow, then there is a seller's remorse that sets in, unfortunately. So I'd say that's a tricky thing. It's an art and a science. Unfortunately, there is no easy answer in that. It's that particular moment in time, and you have to figure it out, because there are folks who sold Instagram for $1 billion, and there are folks who sold WhatsApp for $19 billion, right? And so there's everything in between. But again, there are people who have not sold in time and then lost it all because it just didn't sell at all. So that's just sort of the entrepreneurial part of it. But I'll ask you to sort of, I think you want to know more. Please ask me again.
No, meaning like, what was something that you overcame in your
story.
life?
Yeah.
Your personal story. Yeah.
So I think that the part of overcoming, one of them, I will say that is, again, similar to this particular aspect of giving up, right? I mean, I built, I did 9 startups, and there are 2 of them that went south. And as much as I tried to hang in there, I was just not able to save those 2 companies. Now, while I could not save the companies, I had to overcome that level of depression that you go through. In one case where we had to let people go, but in one case, what I then learned from the first part is to say, is there some way I can save the people and everything around me, my stakeholders? So I fought very hard to go to a publicly listed company who was going to buy us out. And I said, one of my condition is that there are 70 people working for this company, and you have to hire and keep 69 of them. So I couldn't tell them how long. So they finally did agree to take all the 69 people. So at least when the investors lost all their money, those 69 people continued their jobs. I said, you have to make sure that all my customers get treated right. Right. So that's the second thing I did. And 3 is all my vendors get treated right. So I did that. So some of that is part of sort of in an entrepreneurial way that I overcame. The other is in just growing up, coming from very humble beginnings. There were so many points in my life when I felt that I just couldn't cross over. I wanted adventure. I wanted to go across. For example, I wanted to go to study in USA. I was studying in IIM Calcutta, and I wanted to quit that, and I wanted to go, but I didn't just have the money. But again, somewhere deep down, there was a resilience in me, and I just took the gumption. I just jumped on a plane, and I said, I'll figure out. I don't have money to pay my fees. And that has happened multiple times. In my personal journey, I have overcome that. I've found people who trusted me, and then I was able to give that back. I think a lot of it is to do with interpersonal skills. How can I build trust in a person whom I don't know? And that I have gone again and again, I've built that trust. So if I'm proud of one thing, it's my network of friends that I have all over the world, including you, Raju, where I know that if I need something that desperately I need you to do something for me, I can count on you. And I think I have friends who've been my friends for 50 years, and all the way to just last year. So I think that level, of overcoming have-nots to become something beyond that. I think that's what I would recommend and suggest to your audience.
Thank you for sharing that. One word, which I love, gumption. If you don't have it, how do you build it?
It's very difficult. It's very difficult. Again, just like a risk-taking ability, can you nurture risk-taking ability in millennials who are just sitting pretty with affluent parents? Very difficult. Same thing, building gumption is a very difficult thing. You have to work on it, and you have to continue to work on it. So if you feel that there is a one silver bullet that gets you over the hump, it doesn't. But I think what is part of it is that if you're an entrepreneur, especially, then it builds character. And in that building of character, there is a certain, in just way inner feeling that you get that you want to produce this particular product or service. And then that gives you that gumption, right? And so you do it once and you fail. Maybe you do it a second time, you fail, but you just keep going at it, right? And then at one point you develop that character that says, okay, you know what? I'm ready for anything. I think the other piece is, of course, to have the right people around you. So soon you realize that you alone may have the gumption, but if people around you can't put it together, because all the vectors have to point north, all the energies of all the people around you have to come together for a positive outcome. So that's extremely important.
Boy, that really hits me hard, because I've had 5 startups. You've had 9, very different directions where mine went. But yeah, that really hits. But to the point that you're making on gumption, you're saying it can be learned. It's not necessarily you're born with it.
Yes.
Maybe there's a desire you have, but you don't allow it to be nurtured.
Yes, I think yes. Compared to risk-taking ability, which is usually not so easy to develop, gumption, you can build it over a period of time. Yes, I agree.
Well, one word that you mentioned that I think is critical in order to strengthen one's gumption is trust. Can you speak a little bit more about trust? You talked already about surrounding yourself with others. So I want to shift the conversation a little bit to consciousness now. If we're talking about trust, what else other than people, how have you built that ability to be able to just trust in others? What else does that require?
Right. So I can tell you about my own journey as to how I am. I'm not so sure if I can help people become trustworthy, because either they are trustworthy and they can project that trustworthiness. In my personal way, the way I am is WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. You do it once, you do it twice, you keep doing it again and again, and people realize that, okay, I think this person means what he says. So that's one part. The other part is building that network, that interpersonal relationship. So if I have folks with whom I do business, whether it's my real estate agent, for example, or if it's the guy who cuts my hair, to just about anyone from whom I take services, I've been taking services from the same person for 10, 15, 20 years, right? Uh, so there is a relationship that develops, there is a bond that develops, right? And I think that if I do that in my banking services, in my financial handling of people, my hiring and firing of people, is there a consistency? Am I using the same set of rules each time, or am I flip-flopping as I go through life? And I think people are quite smart, right? And especially the youngsters today, they can see through many of these things, and they are much, much simpler than the complexity that we used to live in. I find that life will be better going forward. But I'd say that trust also is your experience, right? And your experience, and also if anybody does a reference check, right, on me, I have time and time and time again gone to investors today to say, hey, would you like to consider investing in my fund? The first thing they say is, hey, if you are involved in this, if we can afford it, we'd love to be in it. Again, your minimum threshold may be above whatever I can afford. But I think there are emails that are floating around where people send me an email saying, hey, what the heck, these guys are saying some amazing things about you. And that truly is because of nothing else that I've done for them, but other than that, I've been just completely straightforward and honest, and done whatever I say I was going to do. And so I'm conscious about being trustworthy.
How do you balance loyalty? Because I feel like while you didn't say the word, that's what you were speaking to. How do you balance loyalty with then innovation?
By being honest. I think loyalty to me is being truthful, being honest, saying it nicely but politely. I'm being very mindful about it now. I used to be very straightforward and harsh about how I used to project these things before. But to me, it is more important that I'm honest about my feedback, whether a product or a service is going to work, whether one candidate is better than the other, in meetings. I'm more forthcoming to that, but now I'm being mindful also. The way I say it, I'm trying very hard. I'm not there yet. But my sense is that if I did not warn you when you're trying to do business with someone that you shouldn't be doing business with, just because I just don't want to either get involved or interfere or piss off the other guy, right? Unfortunately, that guy is going to find out and then saying, well, I'm going to, he's not going to like it. He or she is not going to like it. And my take is, no, I think that I will put my friendship and my trust on the line and make sure that I relay across to you the insight, the deep insight that I have. Otherwise, what's the point? So if I'm a mentor to an entrepreneur, and if I don't get across all the tough love, as they say, if I don't get that across, then I'm doing a disservice in my personal view. So loyalty is fine, but it's misplaced if you don't come across and say things like whatever needs to be said.
Have you ever felt that, we all are programmed, as you know, Jayesh, to just think and do and think and do, but sometimes we don't really get our heart involved. At what point in your life did you feel your heart led you as opposed to your mind and your, the intellect?
So one of the things that I mentioned at the end, the last chapter of my book, is that I've discovered over time three levels of journey in my life. The first one is called wealth affluence, and each one of us works towards that wealth affluence, whatever wealth means to everyone. When I talk about what shall we do with all this money, it does not necessarily, this money doesn't mean that it has to be billions or millions or whatever that amount of money is. So when I talk about wealth affluence, that amount of money that brings a certain amount of contentment in you. But it's the transition then to the next level, which is extremely important, which is time affluence. And it is at that point in time that when you start practicing time affluence, then many of these inner consciousness things sort of wake up, and then the next level after that is mind consciousness. So you go from wealth, affluence, to time affluence, to mind affluence. And mind affluence is essentially saying that you're completely at peace, you're happy, you're calm, you're mindful, you're in a meditative state, which is of course extremely, extremely difficult. But my sense is that I think your heart comes at the transition between wealth and time, because that's when you really take the time. And of course there are many people who are practicing wealth affluence and start doing meditation and mindfulness coaching and things like that. I think it's the beginning of that journey.
So for your personal, in your personal story, where was that? Was there a turning point for you when you switched from
Yes,
one to the
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I decided that I was going to switch my 80-20 to 20-80. So I spent 80% of my time making money and in commerce and economics, and 20% on service and spiritualism. And then I decided that I was going to flip that, and I was going to spend 80% in service and spiritualism and do things that I want to do, and 20% on economics. Now, it just so happens that I've been extremely fortunate. And however, whatever we want to say about luck, it is there. Most people who have made it at some point in their life, they will give credit to luck. I mean, there are many people who just feel that they've done it, and that's fine. More power to them. But I feel luck has a huge, huge, play.
Thank you for sharing that. For someone listening who is interested in making that shift between the 80 and the 20%, can you speak a little bit about what does that look like? You shifted it 80% service and spirituality. What is that?
And I'm going to add to that. You talk about luck. I think it needs more definition, because then people will say, well, it's about luck and I'm just not interested in, because it's going to be luck.
So you have two questions.
Yes.
Yeah. So let me take the luck one, just the continuity of the previous one, and then remind me, Trisha, I'll come back to the second part. But I think, luck is a piece where if you have figured out the why first, why you're doing whatever you're doing, right, in your startup, for example, and then you go to, doing the right things about who are you guys and what is the team and what is this big picture goal of what you're trying to create and how are you going to execute it and manage the cash flow. If you don't do those things, right, luck is basically like saying that I'm going to look at the newspaper every day looking for the lottery number and I'm not getting my lottery. And then one day the lightning strikes to say, hey, can you please buy a lottery ticket? And this is that lottery ticket is the hard work, is the applying yourself, using the brain, building a good team, having the right thesis and executing that plan. Now, even if you do all of those things, two sets of teams, one which does that and one succeeds and one which doesn't do it and doesn't succeed, I think is where the differentiator is. Now, luck is a lot of things. It's the right place, right time, right? But it's these days, it's that, there is a flow of cash. So the cash flow, then there is a user flow, and then there's the data flow. So in our times, it used to be just the P&L and the financial statement, and that's how we invested. Now, you don't have to always, because there are companies that have no cash flow, and still they're out there, and because they have user flow, massive numbers of users, and in some cases just data is flowing rapidly, and so huge amounts of data. And so I think the luck again is really very important to recognize that it's out there, it's an ether, it's not something that it's not fatalistic where you say, okay, well, I give up and I'm never going to succeed because I'm not lucky. I think that's not true. You give luck a chance by working very hard.
There you go. Looking for that. Great. Awesome. And your
question. So Trisha, you were going to say, yes.
It was what you were saying when you decided to flip the 80%, 20% equation. For someone listening that is interested in wanting to do that, what advice can you share about what that could look like in real time, in day-to-day time?
Yeah. So first of all, I wouldn't recommend that people flip from 20-80 to 80-20 day one. It takes time. It takes a lot of practice because, I've tried to retire a couple of times and it's not easy. So, it's not for everyone. But again, that flipping has to come from a deep, conscious, deliberate a journey that you want to go through. You just plan. You say, hey, listen, I really, really want to shift my balance. My equilibrium is shifted way far out to the monetary and the wealth, and I want to bring that back. I want to be more conscious about myself. You know, in a way, I have one life to live, and I want to maximize that one life. My time is limited. I want to maximize that. And what is it that I really, really get joy out of? And if my joy truly, truly is coming out of serving, or by meditating, or doing some travel, I would say experiential. For me, experiential spending is just so dramatically more fulfilling than materialistic spending. And so, if you really truly want that, and you really want to pursue that, then you've got to make a conscious decision one day. And one day, when you do make that decision, you can write that down, and then if you have a plan, you can write that down, put it in the top drawer, and every day you just pick it up and just keep looking at it, till you don't need to look at it on a daily basis. You start looking at it on a weekly basis, one day on a monthly basis, and then one day you don't have to look at it. You're there, you're just following that path, you're going to go at it, and you're loving it, because trust me, once you go down that path, it just takes a little bit of nudge, and then once you're on your way, the momentum is so dramatic that nothing can stop your soul or heart or conscious mind, whatever it is that is guiding you.
That speaks to one of the ideas we talk to our clients about, is that momentum builds clarity, more clarity. And that was a great way to speak into that. What are some of your practices to be more conscious?
I think I transitioned from outcome measurement to journey. I think that was the biggest transition for me, because I worked for a multinational and got trained by IBM. And then subsequently I did, a joint venture with Sony Pictures. And so I just went living my whole life with outcome measurement. And that is sort of a calculator, right? That's at the top of your head all the time. Everything is economics and everything is calculating. And that also unfortunately goes into relationships, which is just very unfortunate, right? But I think once you decide that you want to transition out of it, today when I try to support a nonprofit, I use the East and West both, right? So Raju and I, we were on United Way journey, and there was a huge amount of outcome measurement in a Western style. Everything was about measurable impact. And sometimes, when now, and as an individual, when I look back, and what I'm doing now is I'm just enjoying the journey as well. So I support a eye hospital in Bihar, which is a low income state, Akhand Jyoti Eye Hospital. And while we do 65,000 cataract operations every year, 80% of them free because it's a nonprofit, but the journey that the CEO, the founder, and I go through many a times is just commendable. It's just so much joy in it, because there are some immeasurable things. Just simple example, a older person who's in the agrarian society, farmer, he's old and gets cataract. He sits in a corner in his house, but guess what happens then? Everybody else goes away, and the young girl who is going to school, she gets left behind to look after the grandpa, right? So here is the girl, right, who goes out. Now, the day we do the cataract operation, that farmer goes back to work, but that girl child goes back to school.
Wow.
Now, is that a measurable outcome, or is it a journey?
Yes,
it's just
you're really, that example is really speaking to something that we value, unity consciousness. That something that is seemingly affecting just one person, that's never really the case. And that's such a testimonial for how these types of things can work. So you said 80% of the surgeries are free. That's
done for free. Yeah.
Phenomenal. What an amazing thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
Or so even the transformations that you're experiencing, with these stories, is where suddenly your heart, skips a beat. They go, "Oh my God, I'm part of this."
Yes, and also, recognizing that outcome measurement to journey includes the degree of difficulty, right? So even if it is measurable, so for example, you help educate 1,000 slum kids in Dharavi in Mumbai, in the city, urban, or you educate 100 people, kids in the northeast mountain terrain of India, which one has more impact? The 1,000 kids in Dharavi in Bombay, or those 100 kids in Northeast who absolutely have zero chance of anybody caring for them or looking after them? So there's a degree of difficulty also, right? And these are the things that as you become conscious of, you let go of this constant striving for outcome measurement.
Well, we've experienced some, some of our clients have gone through their transitions and transformations. We didn't know. We were just part of the facilitation. So it hits because that's the journey, right? It's not about how much have we sold and how many people are in the thing and all of that stuff. So but you also said earlier about the cash flow and the data flow. That's important in these times or any times for that matter, right? So it's an 80-20 that you're switching, and I think that's a real blessing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that somehow there are folks who have a DNA based on just their life experience during their career. They figure out economics, right? But there's a DNA for it. And so people talk about it as a business acumen in some cases. Some call it savvy. And then, I have 4 levels that I talk about in that. So one are these folks who are smart, right? So they're intellectually smart and they go to good universities. And so they're great. And then the next level is savvy, above smart, because savvy says, hey, not only are you smart, but you can sell something, right? And then above that, these are folks who are shrewd. So, they're not going to, leave a penny on the table which belongs to them, but they're very shrewd. They'll cut a good deal. They won't lose, at least, if not, And then the last rung is cunning. So cunning says,
I thought you were going to go with another S there.
I wish, but cunning is the last piece, which is people who will just not let you make a penny, and they will just take it all away. So and then most of us can relate to being between those, right? So there are people between savvy and shrewd. There are people between. So I don't do business with smart, and I don't do business with cunning. Now, see, therein lies the equation. Why? Because the cunning, of course, I want nothing to do with them. But smart is not good enough. Because if you don't have the economic savvy or shrewdness, then economics doesn't work. So you're really wanting to do some good out there, but the scaling of it, the repeatability of it only comes from a little bit of economic savvy. And then it grows and grows and grows, including this gentleman who built the eye hospital in Bihar. Started from scratch. It's in the middle of nowhere. They didn't have electricity till recently. Even now they get 8 hours of electricity out of 24 hours, but they're doing all the 65,000 cataract operations. And so there is an economic savvy in the gentleman to say, how am I going to figure this out and grow this? And now we're building next to it, another 300-bed hospital. It's a 350-bed hospital. We're building another one right next to it to make the capacity 100,000 cataract operation. It's a non-profit, but still, right? There is an economic savvy in it.
Absolutely. Wow.
Well, I know one thing I'm going to do as soon as this call is over is buy your book, because I'm really appreciating all the different frameworks that you're presenting and how you're breaking this down. And,
that's my mistake, Jay. I should have already shared that with her. As you were talking, I thought maybe we should have another part to this about your book. But
my book is the website is allthismoney.com. So if you go to allthismoney.com, you can see what the book is about and who are the folks who have interviewed. It's a compilation of interviews essentially, and there is a link there to procure the book or an ebook from Amazon.
Beautiful. Thank you. Allthismoney.com.
Yeah.
Yep.
The title is What Shall We Do With All This Money, right? Of the book.
What shall we do with all this money? Correct.
So, every time I certainly speak with you, Jayesh, I feel like I'm growing leaps and bounds and hearing new things. So we certainly, the wisdom comes from not taking anything for granted. So we really appreciate you. And I hope there's many more opportunities for us to talk with you in the future.
I'm here. Raju, I'm always here for you. And please reach out, if there is, any other topics that you think might be useful for your audience. I'm more than happy to come back.
Many come to mind, because in this co-creative process, learning never stops, right? It's always about the journey. And sometimes when we hear more of that, you just feel validated in that journey.
Yeah.
So in that context, what discoveries might you have had in this conversation, if any?
Yeah. I think what I discovered in my 80-20 to 20-80 journey, as I was speaking to you, both of you, I realized that there is a piece of me which is a fusion. One of the reasons I jumped back into what may seem like an economics model is that it's an impact fund. So I discovered there's a fusion. So it doesn't have to be just for profit or just non-profit, right? So there is impact investing, which is in the middle of both of those. And so there are fusion. And so there are some ideas like that. So if your DNA is like mine, then you can't just go off there and just keep meditating and go into the non-profit world. So that was one of the things that just came to my mind, that wow, while I said I'm doing 80-20, but here I am back into the venture capital fund, but it's a good protein fund. And so there is an impact associated. That's the main reason we're doing it. We're trying to take the animal out of the food chain. That's what this is all about.
Well, so maybe can you spend a minute about that? And is there a way that some of our clients can reach you if there are investors in this audience that are listening, perhaps?
Absolutely.
Where can they reach you, and tell us a little bit about what this venture is?
Yeah. So I think the important thing is to recognize that this is an impact fund. So I think just briefly, animal agriculture is about a $2 trillion market, and alternative protein is about $20 billion, only 1% now. By 2030, it will expand to about $200 billion based on most conservative estimates by many extremely well-known folks out there. By 2050, the alternative protein space is expected to take about 30 to 60% of the market, so which is about $1 trillion. So the opportunity in both economics and impact is just massive. And several factors contributed to the evolution of alternative proteins over the past decade, which included increased consumer interest in health, price, ethical considerations, such as where meat is sourced from, and animal welfare. So our current food ecosystem, as I mentioned, is just unsustainable. We will hit 10 billion population. We slaughter 70 billion animals, 1 trillion fish annually, right? And 14.5% of global warming comes from the food system. 75% of human disease, including the present pandemic, comes from animals. And 80% of antibiotics are pumped into animals. So the promise of alternative protein is to reduce greenhouse emission by 90% and reduce things like deforestation, ocean dead zones, species extinction. So, what is alternative proteins? I mean, most of the folks today know about, alternative proteins, but they're basically protein-rich ingredients sourced from plant-based fungi or tissue culture to replace conventional animal-based sources. Some well-known companies all of you guys know about is like Beyond Meat, which is publicly listed, and Impossible Food, which is valued at 5 billion and may go public soon. So my partner and I, we are setting up a $20 million impact venture capital fund out of Singapore. We will be investing in plant-based, cell-based, and recombinant, or what is called fermentation technologies, in products that include dairy, eggs, meat, seafood alternatives, and also alternatives to materials, so things like leather, wool, silk. And then we'll be investing in multi-stage and secondaries in companies, and geographically 90% will be North America and Asia. 10% will be places like Europe and Israel. Israel is leading also in many of these technologies. And so I mean, we're hoping to do a first close by the end of March. And we've got our venture capital fund manager license, and we're on our way. Happy to talk to anyone.
In Singapore, based in Singapore?
Yes, the fund is based in Singapore. And so all the investments will be made from Singapore, and all the distributions will come out of Singapore. And so, of course, anyone who's interested, please feel free to reach out to me. My email address is, so you can write to Jayesh at goodstartup.com.
Jayesh, Jayesh at goodstartup.com.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been more than a wealth of information and inspiration for our listeners. So much more that we can go into. So Raju already alluded to it earlier that we would love to have you back at some point. And in the meantime, can you tell us a little bit about your background I know
Yes.
that our podcast listeners can't see this, but we also do post these videos on YouTube, and I'm so interested in the background behind you.
Yes. So my background, like this background, not my journey background.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is Darjeeling.
yeah.
This is Darjeeling. It's a tea
This is the
plantation in
virtual
Darjeeling.
background we're talking.
This is virtual background. So I'm traveling every day with different backgrounds. Today it's Darjeeling, and that famous tea comes from Darjeeling, as you know. So I'm traveling every day vicariously.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Because, yeah, something I was listening to yesterday, that this ability we have to be able to travel isn't really limited to just the actual physical travel, that we all have been gifted, the capacity to be able to do that in different dimensions in our minds. And in your case, you're showing us, as you are enjoying it too, that you're traveling daily, you're sitting in the same space physically, but you're allowing yourself to be immersed in, the different places in your mind and sharing that with us. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on your show today.
I know it's late over there, so we appreciate this. We can go on and on, of course.
Yeah.
But we'll look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Good care.
Take care, guys.
Have a great night.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Take care. Namaste.
Bye.
Bye now.